April 1915. A Canadian soldier crouches in a waterlogged trench near Ypres, Belgium. German infantry surge across no man's land through the morning fog. He shoulders his Ross rifle, aims at the approaching shadows, and squeezes the trigger. Click. Nothing. He works the bolt. It refuses to move. Mud has seized the action solid. He slams his palm against the bolt handle. Still nothing. The Germans are 50 yards away now, 40, 30. He abandons the rifle and draws his bayonet, knowing he will likely die in the next 60 seconds because his weapon has betrayed him. This scene repeated itself thousands of times across the Western Front between 1914 and 1916. Canadian soldiers discovered that the rifle their government had issued them, the rifle they had trained with, the rifle they were told was superior to anything the British carried, would fail them at the moment they needed it most. The Ross rifle jammed in mud. It jammed in rain. It jammed when fired rapidly. It jammed when using British-manufactured ammunition. It jammed so consistently that Canadian troops began discarding it on the battlefield, picking up Lee-Enfield rifles from British casualties, even grabbing German Mausers from dead enemies. Anything was better than the Ross. The statistics told a grim story. During the Second Battle of Ypres, entire Canadian units reported failure rates exceeding 50%. At the Somme in 1916, some companies experienced near-total weapon failure during crucial assaults. Men died not because they were outfought, but because they were outgunned by their own equipment. The Canadian Corps developed a brutal battlefield practice. After engagements, they would scour the field for British Lee-Enfields, stockpiling them, hiding them from officers who insisted on Ross compliance. Courts-martial were threatened. Orders were issued and reissued. The official position remained unchanged. Canadian soldiers would carry Canadian rifles. National pride demanded it. Political pressure required it. And men kept dying because of it. The Ross rifle should never have been issued to frontline infantry. Its design philosophy was fundamentally incompatible with trench warfare. Yet it remained in service for 2 years of brutal combat, a testament to bureaucratic inertia and nationalistic stubbornness. But here is the paradox that saves the Ross from being merely a footnote in military failure. The worst combat rifle of the First World War would become its best sniper weapon. The same characteristics that made it useless in the hands of infantrymen made it extraordinarily deadly in the hands of specialists. The rifle that jammed in the mud would achieve kill counts that seemed impossible. The weapon that Canadian soldiers threw away in disgust would be carried by snipers who became legends. This is the story of how catastrophic failure and exceptional success existed in the same firearm, separated only by how it was used and who was using it. Sir Charles Ross designed his rifle with genuine innovation in mind. A Scottish-Canadian inventor and nobleman, he envisioned a weapon that would outperform the British Lee-Enfield on every technical metric. His design featured a straight pull bolt action, a mechanism radically different from the traditional turn-bolt system. Where the Lee-Enfield required the shooter to lift the bolt handle, pull back, push forward, and rotate down, the Ross simply pulled straight back and pushed straight forward. The theoretical advantage was undeniable. Faster cycling, smoother operation, less movement required. On the rifle range, experienced shooters could fire the Ross significantly faster than a Lee-Enfield. The rifle was beautifully made. It featured precision machining to tolerances that British manufacturers considered excessive. The bore was extraordinarily accurate. The .280 Ross cartridge delivered superior ballistics to the British .303 round. In Canadian trials, the Ross consistently outshot the Lee-Enfield at all ranges. Accuracy was exceptional. Build quality was superb. The Canadian government, eager to establish domestic military manufacturing, adopted it enthusiastically. The Ross Rifle Company factory in Quebec City began mass production. Canadian troops deployed to Europe, carrying a weapon their nation insisted was world-class. Then they reached the trenches, and everything changed. The Western Front was mud. It was grit. It was cordite residue and pulverized earth and human filth ground into every surface. Rifles were submerged in shell holes. They were caked in Belgian clay. They were fired hundreds of times without proper cleaning, because proper cleaning was impossible when you lived in a ditch. The Ross rifle's precision tolerances, its engineering pride, became its death sentence. Any debris in the action caused immediate failure. British manufactured ammunition, produced quickly under wartime pressure, had slightly different dimensions than Canadian specifications. These tiny variations caused chambering problems and extraction failures. The straight-pull bolt, so fast in ideal conditions, would bind solid when any friction entered the system. Soldiers in combat, hands shaking with adrenaline, would yank on seized bolts until they bent the mechanism permanently. Then there was the flaw that transcended mere malfunction into lethal design failure. The Ross bolt could be disassembled for cleaning, a normal feature, but it could also be reassembled incorrectly in a way that still allowed the rifle to chamber a round and fire. When assembled wrong, the bolt was not locked. Upon firing, instead of the bolt staying closed while the bullet went forward, the bolt would blow backward into the shooter's face with several tons of force. Men died from catastrophic head injuries caused by their own rifles. Others were blinded or permanently disfigured. The flaw was widely known by mid-1915, yet the rifle remained in service. At the Somme, Canadian units advancing under fire experienced mass weapon failures. Entire platoons found themselves charging German positions with rifles that had become expensive clubs. The Ross rifle had failed the most basic test of any military weapon. It did not work when soldiers needed it to work. Somewhere in the autumn of 1915, a Canadian sniper made a discovery that would alter the Ross rifle's legacy. In the specialized role of precision shooting, away from the rapid-fire chaos of infantry combat, the Ross revealed capabilities that seemed almost contradictory to its infantry reputation. The same tight tolerances that caused malfunctions in mud produced extraordinary accuracy when properly maintained. The same heavy barrel that made it cumbersome for trench raids dampened harmonics and delivered consistent point of impact. The straight-pull bolt, useless when jammed with debris, was lightning fast when operated from a clean, protected position. The .280 Ross cartridge, with its flatter trajectory and higher velocity than the British .303, could reach targets that Lee-Enfield snipers could not touch. Canadian snipers operated differently than infantry. They maintained their weapons meticulously. They fired selectively, not in sustained bursts. They worked from prepared positions, not standing in flooded trenches. They had time to aim, to calculate, to wait for the perfect shot. In this environment, the Ross rifle thrived. At ranges beyond 800 yards, it outperformed every other sniper rifle on the Western Front. The rigid bolt lockup eliminated the flex that degraded accuracy in other designs. The heavy 28-inch barrel provided sight radius and stability. Snipers reported being able to hit man-sized targets reliably at 1,000 yards, distances where German snipers with Gewehr 98s were still effective but less consistently lethal. Francis Pegahmagabow became the most decorated Indigenous soldier in Canadian military history, credited with 378 confirmed kills and more than 300 captures. He used a Ross rifle. Henry Norwest, a Métis sniper, recorded 115 confirmed kills. He used a Ross rifle. These were not anomalies. Canadian sniper teams across the Western Front racked up kill counts that seemed impossible, and they did it with the weapon their infantry brothers had learned to hate. The Ross became so effective in sniper hands that German forces specifically targeted Canadian sniper positions with artillery and counter-sniper fire. Intelligence reports from captured German documents reference the effectiveness and fear of Canadian sharpshooters. The grim mathematics were undeniable. An infantry soldier might fire 30 rounds in a combat engagement, hoping some would hit. A sniper fired one round and someone died. The Ross rifle, utterly unsuited for the former, was nearly as perfect for the latter. Canadian sniper doctrine evolved around the weapon's strengths. Teams would establish hides in destroyed buildings or carefully constructed positions in no man's land. They would wait for hours, sometimes days, for high-value targets, German officers, machine gun crews, enemy snipers. When the shot came, it was at distances and with accuracy that left witnesses questioning whether it was possible. The Ross rifle in the right hands was not just effective, it was devastating. The weapon that symbolized Canadian military failure in one context had become the symbol of Canadian excellence in another. August 1916. After the catastrophic weapon failures at the Somme, the Canadian Corps officially withdrew the Ross rifle from frontline infantry service. Soldiers who had been court-martialed for abandoning their Ross rifles were quietly vindicated. The Lee-Enfield became the standard Canadian infantry weapon. Politicians in Ottawa faced harsh questions about why it had taken 2 years and countless casualties to acknowledge what frontline troops had known since Ypres. The Ross Rifle Company's government contracts were terminated. Sir Charles Ross's reputation never recovered. His rifle had become synonymous with procurement failure and the deadly consequences of putting national pride above soldier safety. But the Ross did not disappear. Canadian sniper units retained it throughout the remainder of the war. The specialized role had proven the design's worth, and no sniper wanted to surrender a weapon that delivered results. Production continued on a limited scale specifically for sniper variants, fitted with fine-tuned target sights and selected for exceptional accuracy. When the armistice came in November 1918, the Ross rifle's combat record was paradoxical beyond measure. Conservative estimates suggest that Ross malfunctions contributed to several thousand Canadian casualties through jammed weapons in critical moments. Simultaneously, Canadian snipers using Ross rifles were credited with well over 5,000 confirmed enemy kills, likely many more that went unrecorded. The lessons were absorbed slowly. Military procurement officers learned that weapons must be designed for actual combat conditions, not idealized testing environments. The obsession with tight tolerances gave way to understanding that reliability matters more than precision manufacturing. The British Lee-Enfield, with its looser tolerances and simpler mechanism, had proven superior not because it was more accurate, but because it worked when covered in filth. The Ross remained a case study in how national pride and political pressure can override military necessity, and how soldiers pay the price for those decisions. Yet the rifle found new life in unexpected places. During the Second World War, Canadian forces still used Ross rifles in sniper roles in the early years before being replaced by Lee-Enfield No. 4 Mark I-T variants. Some remained in Canadian military inventory into the 1950s. Civilian shooters discovered what military snipers had known. In target shooting competitions where the rifle could be kept clean and maintained, the Ross was extraordinarily accurate. Original Ross rifles in good condition became collector's items, prized for their craftsmanship and their contradictory history. The Ross rifle's legacy is not simple. It cannot be dismissed as merely a failure. Thousands of soldiers cursed it. Hundreds of snipers swore by it. It killed the men who carried it and killed the men they aimed at. It represents both the worst of military procurement and the best of adaptive tactics. The question it poses remains relevant. Can a weapon that fails catastrophically for most users but excels for a specialized few be considered a success or a failure? The answer depends on who you ask. Ask the infantry who charged German trenches with jammed rifles, and you get one answer. Ask the snipers who used it to become legends, and you get another. Both answers are true. That is the strange, contradictory, ultimately human story of the Ross rifle.